My name is Andy Agathangelo. I'm the founder of the Transparency Task Force. We are an international community that is dedicated to driving up the levels of reform within the financial system. We have a very clear and a very specific mission. Our mission is to promote ongoing reform of the financial sector so that it serves society better. And our vision is to build a highly respected international institution that is dedicated to protecting the consumer's interest and making sure that the consumer is being treated fairly. So we think that our aims and objectives are very good. I guess we're biased, but we believe what we're trying to do is very, very worthwhile. We also think there is a huge need for it. We think the financial services sector is profoundly powerful, but in massive need for change, and that's why we have managed to grow with very little resource indeed, from a standing start of zero back in May 2015 when I gave my first speech about the idea of having a reform organisation. We've grown very, very quickly to over 2,700 members. Now, most of our members are in the UK, but roughly 1,000 people are scattered across Europe, the USA, Australia. We also have some people in the Far East. And I'm going to start off by basically sharing with you the parts of the world where the Transparency Task Force has some kind of interest. And I'm going to say this for a very, very specific reason. And that is this. The Transparency Task Force, we have groups of people in all of the places I'm about to mention to you. We have people in Hong Kong, in the Netherlands, in the USA, in Singapore, Belgium, Luxembourg, Australia, Switzerland, India, Ireland, Canada, France, South Africa. And our plan very specifically is to replicate what we've managed to do in the UK right around the world. So I'm going to spend a moment talking about what we've managed to do within the UK. Within the United Kingdom, we've had a very significant and we believe quite prominent effect. We've managed to get 2 inquiries opened by the British government, one on the issue of the lack of transparency on costs and charges in investments. That was opened a couple of years ago by the Work and Pension Select Committee. And we also very recently campaigned to the British government to open an inquiry on pension scams. Pension scams is a particularly big problem within the UK marketplace. Both inquiries have created an opportunity for change. And I'm emphasizing the word change because we have a strategy for driving change, which is to bring together the thinking of 2 groups of people. On one hand, there are those like us on this Zoom meeting who have a sense of passion and purpose for the change that we want to see. But there are also others that we characterize as having the power and the position to make change possible, by which we mean the policymakers, the politicians, the regulators, and so on. And our idea, very simply, is to find ways to bring these 2 groups together so that people who have a sense of passion and purpose for the change we want can influence the thinking of those who have the power and the position to make the change possible. So my dream is to make Transparency Task Force in Europe, in North America, in Australia, in the Far East, and so on, as established and as significant as it is very, very quickly within the United Kingdom marketplace. Okay, the reality is that there is a great deal of work for us to do, and our strategy is to find the right sorts of people. We are absolutely convinced that having the right sorts of people involved with our work is going to be a prerequisite for success. We are therefore only really looking to connect with and engage with individuals who have an understanding of the problems within the financial services sector, who see the conflicts of interest, who see the short-termism, who see the asymmetries of information, who see the fact that the industry very often puts itself before its customers, people who can see that there is often a dynamic of profit before principles, or to put it another way, a dynamic of money before morals. And we are doing many, many, many different things to try to make a difference in relation to that. And just to very briefly, before we go to introductions from everybody else, just to very, very briefly elaborate on the fact that we are doing many different things, I will just quickly show you our groups. Now, until lockdown, our groups were only really available to people in the UK, because all of our groups have meetings, and because of pre-lockdown, all of our meetings were real meetings in person. Of course, we now have Zoom. So all of our groups that were only previously available to people in the UK are now available to everybody around the world. So my colleague Alexandra will be, after today's meeting, probably tomorrow morning, circulating a note, and one of the things she'll include in her note to you all is an invitation to join whichever groups matter most to you. We have one on governance, culture and conduct, another on financial stability, which is all about the propensity for further global financial crises, another about protecting the wealth of the vulnerable elderly. Particularly in the UK, we have an issue around the abuse of elderly people, from financial abuse I'm talking about here. Another all about violation tracker, which Jacina knows quite a bit about. I might talk a bit about that later. We've created the all-party parliamentary group on pension scams. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Authentic communications, fintech interoperability and open finance, financial planning, constructive disruptors, females for fairer finance. This is a brand new group. It's only a few weeks old. We're already involved in a campaign to make sure that retired ladies in the UK are given the right level of pensions. Another group all about malpractice, malfeasance, misconduct, mis-selling. It's mostly made up of people who've been scammed. Pensions, of course, a very big topic. Pisces, which is all about the idea of investing responsibly. Leadership, we're conducting video interviews of financial services leaders, and we're creating the international network of ethical financial services leaders. A group that's very interesting called Regulators Watch. Regulators Watch has been formed recently because of the increasing concern that many people have that the regulators are not doing their job well enough. Investments, foreign exchange and payments, banks and building societies, and academics. So when Alexandra sends you the notes tomorrow, if there are any groups that you're not yet in that you would like to join, then please do let Alexandra know. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. The session is being video recorded. We might use some of it or all of it and get it out there on social media. Please do make good use of the chat. We've got a lovely, small, cozy group today, so everyone's going to have lots of chance to speak and have their points of views expressed. But please do also take the opportunity to connect with each other from chat. The chat will be circulated amongst the group. Alexandra will shortly put her email address into the chat. If you happen to mention something that you wish you hadn't and you want it to be taken out of the video recording, then just pop Alexandra an email within 12 hours or so from the close of the session, and we'll make sure that we do that. Okay, enough from me. We're going to go to introductions. We're going to go in the following order, please. We're going to go to Dean, then Christoph, then Jacina, then Philip. Then we're going to go from Philip to Arnold. Lovely to see you with us, Arnold. Enrico, then Brian. So Mr. Dean McClelland, lovely that you're with us. Dean's going to be speaking later, so his initial introduction could be relatively short and sweet. Dean, over to you. Thank you very much. You're on.
Oh, right. Okay, great. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so I'll just intro. I won't really discuss what we're doing. My name is Dean McClelland. I'm the founder of Tontine Trust. We're the world's first fully transparent pension fund. We're aiming to do a little bit of disruption to the sector by essentially rolling out a product that we know consumers absolutely want above all other pension products. But as a new entrant to the sector, we need to gain trust fast. And the biggest single thing we think that is going to help us do that is by giving radical transparency on what we're doing going forward, so that everybody knows what's happening to their pension funds, what fees are being charged, and where it's all going. And they have absolute certainty that when they finally reach retirement, that the money's going to be there for them. And that's our mission. And we're very much aligned with Transparency Task Force and working on this.
Thanks, Dean. Dean is a truly jet-setting entrepreneur, visionary, mover, shaker, disruptor. I know you're going to really find this session interesting later on. And we're doing all we can to help shine a bright light on what Dean's doing, because it's truly, truly progressive and enlightened. Dean, you're normally all over the world, but right now, where are you? Are you in Dublin right now?
I'm finally in Dublin, obviously where we're building the company, but Dublin's gone into lockdown. So it's, I can't meet, I've met the team, but we can't have any more meetings. So I'm considering jet setting off somewhere else warmer next week. Okay, you should come and join me, Andy.
Maybe I will. Find a nice beach somewhere with cocktails and I'll definitely join you. Thanks, Dean. We're going to go from Dean in Dublin to Krzysztof, who I think is in Poland right now. So Krzysztof Grabowski, please do introduce yourself, sir. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon to everybody. You see, now I am on retirement, but still very, very active. My main field of interest currently is I am an expert witness on market manipulation cases. Well, I'm also a securities broker and PhD in law, which I performed 7 years ago on shareholders' rights directive. That's about me.
Thank you very much. Wonderful, great, Krzysztof. I'm going to share with you a screen to share to everybody, but in particular, I'm thinking here about Krzysztof. I mentioned earlier violation tracker. So allow me to share my screen to do this. I know a few of you have seen this before. I know that Jacina is already involved with the project. So Krzysztof, I'm thinking particularly of you here. I'm thinking particularly as well for Philip and ShareAction. We're going to be fixing up some conversations with ShareAction about this. Philip, you may or may not be aware that Catherine is actually one of our ambassadors. She's one of the very first ambassadors we have. And for reasons that will become very clear, what I'm about to show you is right up ShareAction's street. So what is Violation Tracker? Violation Tracker is a database. It tracks violations of regulation, all types. It's very, very impressive, very, very powerful. You can search on it in many, many different ways. The first thing I'm going to do is show you how different industry sectors perform when it comes to violations. Now, what you're looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is a table of the worst offenders at the top. Unfortunately, I'm ashamed to tell you that financial services is the worst performing sector when it comes to violations of regulation. You will see financial services is number one. Not only is it the worst, it's the worst by a long way. If this was a horse race, financial services would win by so far that people would suspect it was on steroids or something. Okay, that's how bad it is. Because look at the numbers. $325 billion worth of infringements since the year 2000. This is not since the beginning of time, it's just this century. 325 billion, not million, billion. 5,976 incidents of regulatory infringements. The next worst one is oil and gas. Now, everybody thinks it must be oil and gas because, my goodness me, you have an oil spillage in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's like, billions and billions and billions worth of harm done to the planet. It's not. It's the second one. And there is roughly a 7 times multiple between oil and gas. Financial services is roughly 7 times bigger. Pharmaceuticals is the third, 41, so a little bit less than oil and gas. Motor vehicles is 30, a bit below pharmaceuticals. Can you see all the numbers below are a small reduction on the number before? So if you were looking at a chart, it would be obvious to us that financial services is a massive outlier. And we think this is proof positive that there is something grotesquely wrong with the governance and the culture and the conduct within the financial services sector. Now, I will also briefly explain, if you click on financial services, you then have the worst offending organizations. This is an American database. It's not properly yet. It's not properly in the UK yet. We are working on that. We have a project all about it. When Alexandra circulates the notes, she will invite you to become involved with the Violation Tracker project if you are not already involved with it. Bank of America is the first, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, etc. And when you scroll down, you get the individual cases. So Bank of America is the worst individual case, etc., etc. And when you scroll down, 2 obvious bits of information hit you. First of all, the same organizations are coming up time after time after time. And also, if you look at the third column in, you will see that the same violations, investor protection, toxic securities, false claims, mortgage abuses, the same issues are coming up time after time after time. And we believe this proves something. And what we believe it proves is that regulation is failing. That's a bold statement, regulation is failing. And I say that because of this. The primary purpose of financial regulation is to get the marketplace to behave in an honorable, civilized, credible way. It's to protect the consumer. There is no regulator around who can basically prove that they are doing a good job. All the time we have this pattern. And the pattern is easy to see. The pattern is this. The entity does something wrong. It gets caught doing something wrong. It gets fined by the regulator for doing something wrong. And then guess what? It carries on doing it. We believe the culture within parts of financial services is so rotten that there is a culture where this kind of penalty, this kind of infringements are simply seen as a cost of doing business. That is why we are working very hard with the people at Violation Tracker to bring it to the UK, to bring it to Europe, to take it to Australia, Canada, etc. It's very well established in the USA. It gets 2 million, I repeat, 2 million hits per month. And we know that Europe needs this. We know that UK needs it as well, because it will help change behavior. So when Alexandra circulates the notes tomorrow, if Violation Tracker is of interest to you, then please stick your hand up and get involved. The last thing I'm going to show you very quickly is offence groups. So what you can do, and it's an amazing database. You go to, for example, and I'm doing this for Philip's benefit, environment-related offences. Share Action as an organisation is very into governance, and particularly governance around things like climate change, etc. It gives you the top 10 worst offending companies. The worst offender is BP because of the Gulf of Mexico spillage. And then you have all of the individual incidences. And as you can see, you get the type of classification, environmental violation. So that's why we're fixing up dialogue with Share Action and various other parties around the world. So that was because of what Christoph explains as part of his role in terms of expert witness, violations, etc. We're now going to go to Jacina, who's also speaking later. So Jacina's introduction will be also relatively short. Thank you, Jacina. Over to you. Thank you.
It will be. Thanks, Andy, and delighted to be here as always. I said in a conference this afternoon I was speaking at that I'm starting to feel like Mrs. Fix-It because I keep on speaking about how to fix financial services, and I'm getting more and more the bit between the teeth. So this is the stubborn Dutch woman in me. I don't give up, I continue. And the more people say no, the more I say yes. Having said that, Of course, I had a long career in banking, in the capital markets arena and in the dealing room. So I've seen all the various bits and pieces of mis-selling, deontological codes, etc. From there, moving to the European Parliament, where I was specifically recruited to counteract lobbyism. And that was interesting in itself because it took part during the financial crisis. And now I'm with CFA Institute, and really I found the job of my life, really looking at business conduct and ethics and systemic risk.
Thank you, Jacina. I've got to know Jacina a little bit over the last couple of years. She's an absolute pleasure to deal with and work with. Jacina won the Transparency Trophy when we had our event in Belgium last year, in Brussels last year. Jacina is the ambassador of the Transparency Task Force, and I agree, Jacina, you are absolutely perfectly suited to the role that you have as head of regulatory outreach for the whole of CFA for Europe. Wonderful to have you with us. I'm looking forward to your session later. We're going to go straight to Philip. Philip, please do unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy, and nice to meet everyone. I'm Philip Wölk. I work at ShareAction's EU policy program based in Brussels. Thanks also for showing that the tool, which indeed is very relevant also. I guess for those who don't know ShareAction, we are a responsible investment advocacy group, but we don't only do policy work. On the contrary, that's a smaller part of what we do. But we usually work a lot with investors. We table AGM resolutions. We have networks of investors. So we usually try to work with investors. But obviously, what you have showed clearly shows that the policy angle of it and raising the bar across the board is essential, because you'll always have best in class, but you also need to make sure that at least you limit harm and damage. So I think on that we very much agree. And the other bit is that I feel it also links very well to some of the work we're doing at EU level, following the Sustainable Corporate Governance initiatives on directors' duties and mandatory due diligence. So I think that's also very topical. And I'm pleased to be here and looking forward to the discussion later on.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Philip. In fact, what I'm going to do, with your permission, of course, is my colleague Alexandra, who's behind the TTF logo, the shield logo. Alexandra, please liaise with Bryony to fix up a 20-minute Zoom meeting for me, for Philip, and for Greg Leroy in Washington, D.C., so we can properly present a violation tracker, because this is right up your street. We had a very good conversation just early this afternoon, Philip, with Fiona Reynolds, Chief Executive of the UNPRI. And it's obvious to me this is something you should know more about. Great to have you with us, Philip. Thank you very much. And you're based in Brussels, yes?
Yeah, though COVID related, I'm currently in Italy, but I'm in Brussels. I'm in the Brussels office. Yeah.
Okay. Whereabouts in Italy?
In the very northern Dolomites, in Trento. Yeah.
Okay, lovely, lovely. We're now going to go to Brian. Brian, please introduce yourself, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Andy, and it was nice to speak with you this morning.
Yes, yes.
I just want to confirm that you can hear me, because I'm not sure about the vision of this. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, I'm based in, I'm living now in the Algarve, sunny Algarve, a Scot who left Scotland 20 years ago to work in China. And just before I left in 2009 to go to Curops, which has turned out to be a real disaster. Since then, I've been chasing around for 8 years now, chasing regulators, IFAs, trustees, bondholders, the whole shooting match, and going in circles, I would say. I would say that I've spoken with 40 organizations or individuals that should be in a position to help, but they're either in denial or too lazy or whatever you want to describe it, but really making progress to try and get some justice and fairness back in the system. That's proved difficult. And it was heartening to hear Andy on a working pensions evidence session saying aggressively things need to happen. Yeah. And it was disappointing to hear people saying that things have been going on since 2002. And I thought, I'm the junior here. I'm a 72-year-old junior when people have been fighting since 2002. and it really has to stop. A QROPS system is still being very actively promoted in various parts of the world. A lot of them that I've been in contact with, up to, I've got awareness of 4,000 people that are really upset.
Right.
I think it's 4,098 now, because 2 or 3 of them have died of exhaustion, I think, trying to fight it.
Yeah.
But it's a really a situation that needs to be addressed, and addressed rapidly, because people are really suffering. I would also add that it takes on more. I hate to add more to this investigation, but specifically Asia are active in promoting there, and also where the Isle of Man and Guernsey and the Channel Islands fit in here.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure, they just deny all knowledge. Oh, you're not UK registered, you don't live in the UK now. All this kind of diversion, just to take you off the scent. But we've really got set some actions in place that bring conclusions. I mean, one example is, and I'm not scared to say it, Axiom Legal Financing Fund is run by a guy, Tim Schools. He went into receivership, or went down, in 2012. The SFO, Serious Fraud Office, started investigating in 2014, and he's in court tomorrow. It's taken 8 years, and that really, it strikes a nerve.
Yeah.
So I can't say too much about what I've done or anything like that, because I'm just interested in moving this whole thing forward, and then I'll do anything to help.
Thank you very much, Brian. It was a real pleasure speaking with you earlier today, and I can honestly tell everybody that the UK and expats from the UK living overseas, etc., we have a, forgive me using the language, but we have a pension scams pandemic. There are thousands and thousands of people being tricked into moving the pensions from one place to another, and they end up being financially abused and exploited. It's as simple as that. In terms of, okay, what are we doing about it? Well, I can share with you my screen again, just to very, very quickly explain that not only have we managed to get an inquiry opened about the pension scams problem, we, the Transparency Task Force, this little no resource, no power entity, we, us lot, we have got a brand new all-party parliamentary group on pension scams opened. We have recruited all of these politicians. These are all British politicians, because it's a British all-party parliamentary group. They include, for example, this gentleman here, who's the chair of the Working Pension Select Committee, and there are many, many others. So we are basically doing what should have been done years ago, and we're bringing together all the stakeholders to say enough is enough. What needs to happen? How do we close down these scam operations? And another thing that Alexandra will mention in the notes that she'll circulate tomorrow is that we have many individuals who have volunteered to become part of the secretariat for this all-party parliamentary group. They include many, many highly credible people. I'll scroll down quite quickly. And if you want to be involved with this, then you are welcome to. If you think you can help in some way, then volunteer, become part of this community that's doing what it can to basically challenge the authorities to do a better job. And we really do know that the authorities can do a better job. We really do know that. We've even got a QC. Ian Mitchell is a leading QC in the UK. He's even giving his time voluntarily for the group as well. So thank you very much indeed for your introduction, Brian. We're now going to go straight to Arno, who I've got to know quite well over the last few years. Arno, please introduce yourself if you can. Oh, you can go to Vision.
I can.
Wonderful. I love talking to Arno, because I think he's got one of the best voices going. So Arno, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Well, no, first of all, thank you for organizing this symposium, and I'll quickly introduce myself as well. I work for Better Finance. I'm in charge of communications for Better Finance. For those of you who don't know Better Finance, it's the European Federation of Investors and Financial Services Users. So basically, our constituency basically includes individual and small shareholders, fund and retail investor savers, pension fund participants, pensioners, a whole, I mean, as such, we basically have the best interest of all European citizens at heart, and our scope is very wide. So what is it going to take to fix financial services in Europe is, well, directly up our street in any case. Quickly on a personal note, I'm based in Brussels, so we're all slightly, they're not calling it a lockdown, but it definitely feels as a lockdown. So we're all at home, and in a couple of hours, I won't be allowed to leave my home anymore because we are under a curfew as well. So there we go. So I'm very interested in following what everybody has to say and listening to all of you. And thank you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you very much. If you don't know Better Finance, everybody, then please get to know them. They are a wonderful pan-European organisation, a very, very credible body that is genuinely aligned with the consumer's interest. And Arno, I have to say this, every time I see you, you're looking more and more like Eric Cantona. You're a very lucky man.
That's very nice of you. My voice, my look compared to Cantona, not bad.
You should start wearing your shirt with your collar up like this as well.
With the lockdown, I stopped shaving as well. So, just...
Very good. Very good. Thanks, Arno. And we're now going to our last participant, who I think is Zenon Papaphilippou. I hope I pronounced this correctly. So Zenon, please do introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Pleased to be here with you. To be honest, I just received your invitation this afternoon.
Yeah.
I'm a CFA member. I'm based in Cyprus. I'm a board member of the CFA Society of Cyprus, and actually the advocacy chair as we speak. So, and because I work in the financial services, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about improving our financial services, especially what has been going on in the latest years. For my country, it's really important because, as many of you are aware of what happened to us in 2013 after the haircut we had in the banking crisis. So the financial services had a cost on that. So yes, I'm really eager to hear what you have to say, what you propose. So I'm just going to be a good listener on this. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Zenon. By the way, you're not just going to be a good listener. You might think you're just going to be listening, but believe me, you're going to become actively involved in the conversation, because I know that we'll be speaking straight to your heart. It is wonderful you're here with us, Zenon. My dad was Greek Cypriot. Yeah, dad is Greek Cypriot. A very hard-working man.
Yes.
He did well in business. He built restaurants. He retired to Cyprus.
Yes.
Like many Greek Cypriots, he put all his money in the Bank of Cyprus, and the rest is history. The rest is history. Instead of the last few years of his life being comfortable and secure, it wasn't.
Yes.
And I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you this. A few months ago, we published a book. And the reason we published this book is partly because of my father. I would explain. I know that the last few years of my dad's life were not what they should have been, because instead of him being financially secure, he was financially anxious, because he lost a lot of money. Not his fault, but we all know what happened with the global financial crisis, and we all know how hard Cyprus was hit, how hard Greece was hit. So we will basically tell you that we have published our book, Why We Must Rebuild Trustworthiness and Confidence in Financial Services, and how we can do it. We are very, very proud to say that we've done something that has never been done before. We have brought together over 65 people from around the world to respond to the question, what needs to be done to fix financial services? And I promise you, some of my motivation, and frankly, some of my motivation to tolerate the sacrifices I'm personally making to run the Transparency Task Force instead of earning a decent living is because of the experience my father had. And I know that many, many people around the world were harmed very badly by the financial services crash of 2007, 2008. We know from research conducted by Oxford University that approximately 10,000 people across Europe, UK, Canada, North America, USA that is, over 10,000 people killed themselves as a consequence. Now, my father was never one of those people, don't misunderstand me, but I do understand from his life experience how many other people ended up deciding to kill themselves because they lost their jobs, they lost their livelihoods, they lost their income, they lost their homes, they lost their families, and the rest is the sad tale that it is. So I'm very, very pleased that you are here, Zenon. Do not allow yourselves to be a passenger on this meeting. Please actively participate. Thank you all very much indeed for introducing yourselves. I'm very pleased you're all here. We are going to go straight to Philip, who's going to be our first speaker. Philip, over to you. We've got 10 minutes or so for your presentation, then we've got maybe 5 or 10 minutes or so for Q&A afterwards. Please do take yourself off mute, Philip, and share with us what you would like to say. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. Just because I wasn't really sure about the format and who was on there, so I think I've prepared a very short presentation, but I'll just run through it quite quickly. I'm trying to share my screen right now. So yeah. So what's it going to take to fix financial services in Europe? Well, we've already introduced ourselves, and I believe several of you are already quite acquainted with SureAction and what we do. But we are a responsible investment advocacy group, and as you can see, our vision is a world where ordinary savers and institutional investors work together to ensure our communities and environments are safe and sustainable for all. And our mission is to unleash the positive potential of the mainstream investment system. And we do this in a number of ways, which I've already mentioned, through networks, through engagement, but also through policy. And also on a variety of issues, not just on the environment. I mean, we work on climate, on biodiversity, but one of the programs we run is the Workforce Disclosure Initiative, which is where we use investor influence to get companies to be transparent and disclose on issues relating to the workforce and human rights. And as I said, I'm working on the overarching policy work stream. And exactly because for responsible investment to flourish, we need an enlightened legal and regulatory landscape in which transparency and sustainable long-term thinking are not just permitted, but are actually rewarded. While a well-functioning financial system free from distortion is per se a desirable outcome, I'm going to focus on those elements that link more to our mission and are more specific to sustainability. But obviously they depend on transparency. And so I believe you're all very familiar with developments and ambitious policy measures that have been coming out of Brussels in the past few years under the umbrella of the Action Plan on Financing Sustainable Growth, and what came out of first of the high-level expert group and then the technical expert group. So I'm not going to go into the details of that. But I think it is a very good time to have this discussion, because this horizontal comprehensive strategy is now being brought to our next level with the renewed sustainable finance strategy, which is due to be published in a few months' time, which will have a greater sense of urgency and hopefully a higher ambition. So this is a great opportunity to build on the action plan and address other areas of the financial system and other areas of sustainability. So for instance, the public consultation that was conducted a few months ago addressed a number of other areas such as green securitization, the project pipeline, credit rating agencies. So it's really a comprehensive set of measures. But because of you obviously can basically categorize it in three big areas. So the action plan and the strategy are bringing about new tools, such as obviously the taxonomy, which we all know, but the EU Green Bond Standard, EU Climate Transition, and Paris Aligned benchmarks. But also what other things that are coming up are, for instance, a review of the European long-term investment funds and to make them effective, or the use of the eco label as a green label for retail investment funds. And then the transparency silo, So again, the taxonomy regulation and the requirements under that, but company reporting, effective and meaningful company reporting under a review, under a more ambitious non-financial reporting directive that also considers impacts on the environment and society, so that has a double materiality perspective and gradually moves away from only reporting what is financially material to the company. And how this links to the disclosure regulation, which is maybe what I would like to spend some time talking about today. And then finally, because of the discussion we've touched upon early on that sometimes this is, well, obviously transparency brings about behavioral change, and once you publish information and disclose information, investors, financial market participants, and are going to use that information. So there is behavioral change coming from that. But as we've discussed before, this is often not enough, and you need to encapsulate certain duties into legislation, such as what we call for, and the whole work stream on the expansion of fiduciary duties to integrate sustainability, or also and also relevant for today's discussion, I think, the integration of end investor sustainability preferences in, for instance, in financial advisors' mandates, or so in sectoral legislation under UCITS, MiFID, and so on. But also, and again, on what I've mentioned before, on the whole sustainable corporate governance discussion, and how this change translates also to the corporate level, and how directors' duties are expanded to include due consideration and the duty of care of the long-term success of the company, and mandatory due diligence obligations. But our work on reviewing and surveying the largest asset managers' approaches to responsible investors, to responsible investment, has shown that, okay, European asset managers tend to perform better than other asset managers, but still there are a lot of areas where, when it comes to disclosure, to engagement, to where they could be doing much more, and where we feel like a lot of the impacts aren't appropriately considered. And for instance, another element is 80% of our sample supports the TCFD recommendations, but only 19% discloses in line with the recommendations by the task force. So, so this is why I would like to spend a few minutes talking about the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation and the proposed regulatory technical standards, so the level 2 legislation. Because, as you may know, under the new disclosure regulation, the European supervisory authorities have been tasked with developing a set of technical standards on how financial market participants under the scope of the regulation will have to disclose this information on the impacts of their investments, both at product level for the so-called Article 8 and 9 products, so for products that either consider ESG characteristics or that pursue sustainable objectives, so let's say impact investments, but also at entity level for large asset managers. So, and there has been a lot of backlash on these standards, and so much so that there is even it seems now that the adoption of these standards will be delayed basically by one reporting cycle. So so certainly these standards aren't perfect, and because they apply to a variety of products, of market participants, it's very hard to come up with a consistent and comprehensive set of indicators. But what we feel is a very good step forward is the so-called Table 1. So that's a list of 32 indicators that are mandatory on a number of different issues. There are a few issues with some of them, but in general, the approach is that these are always to be considered principal adverse impacts. So they always lead to an adverse impact, and it's basically regardless of the severity of severity. So, for instance, it's basically saying that 1 ton of GHG emissions is 1 ton too many, because even if it's not material or particularly significant at the product level or at the entity level, it's still contributing adversely to it's still having a big impact on the environment in this case. So we think that actually, at first we were obviously disappointed by the fact by this what seems to be the delay. On the other hand, we think that's also an opportunity for financial market participants to do a trial run, if you want, because the first reporting cycle will or seems that it will only be a principle-based approach, so only based on the level 1 text. So supervisors will only enforce that and not these proposed standards. So we think that's an opportunity well, it will reduce this legal uncertainty, which was a big issue, because so it will allow to basically have a gradual phase in, if you like, to gather that data and treat it as a reporting exercise, looking to the first actual reporting cycle. And we know that, for instance, some asset managers, including British ones, are planning on disclosing disclosing in line with these RTS. So that's really the approach we suggest. And then, yeah, as I said, there are some issues with indicators, but for instance, that as many things in the Sustainable Finance Action Plan, the indicators seem more geared towards listed equities, or at least listed issuers. So less for other asset classes. It's not really clear how to deal with sovereign debt or project finance or other things. But in general, I think this is like a very ambitious piece of legislation, which will raise the bar and will finally ask financial market participants to be serious about their impacts and disclose their impact, especially when they're marketing products under ESG labels or impact investment labels or so on. And finally, we understand that there are clear issues on on how to get hold of that data, and that large amount of data that is needed to disclose this. But and here is the link with the non-financial reporting directive, which is being reviewed also under under double materiality perspective, so to include indicators on impact and with a more clear standard, like a non-financial reporting standard. So I think there are developments on that, and obviously they're not aligned. So, but we think there's European single access point on company data, both on sustainability and on financial data, that is coming up. And so there are these developments from a regulatory perspective. But on the other hand, we feel it's never going to be enough, because, for instance, there are going to be investee companies that are outside of the scope of NFRD. So effectively, it is, and that's nothing new, it really is down to investors to effectively do their engagement and demand the missing data from companies, and I think they have a right to ask the companies they invest in to disclose more, and that's, as I said, something we do already with the WDI, and also from data providers, because data providers are providing a useful service, but they can step up their game as well, and they are in part already doing that. But I think there's room for that. And then there's a big discussion which I won't address, but that if we want, we can touch upon later, is on how this will link to Brexit or the end of the transition, and how effectively being one of the first legislation coming out of Brussels, that, and not on sustainable finance in general, that coming into force in March 2021 will not directly be applicable to the UK. So, but the government has announced that it wants to match the ambition of the sustainable finance strategy. So that's another interesting angle to it. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or to go more into detail on some of the things I mentioned. I mean, it was really just a run through, but yeah, happy to answer any questions to discuss further.
Philip, thank you very much indeed for sharing with us your thoughts there. Clearly, what you and Share Action are doing to try to raise the bar in terms of not just responsible investing, but frankly responsible mindsets in corporates in Europe and the UK is extremely important work. Do you do you get a sense that organizations want to change, or are they having to be dragged towards change by the regulators and the authorities? What is your take on that? And then we'll open up to any other comments from others. Thank you.
No, I mean, I think, to be fair, we have productive discussions with trade associations and representatives of the industry, and in general, there's a more nuanced positions. So there are financial market participants who generally, or for instance, who support the objective of the regulation and have issues in the implementation, for instance, in these standards that I've talked about. I feel there's both of it. There are those who genuinely feel there are some issues with it, and as I've said, there are some issues with it. But then there are those who don't want to disclose some of that information, not just because they don't think it's meaningful, because on the other hand, there's a lot of talk about information overload and not all that information being relevant, but on the other hand, let that decision be taken by the users of the information, not by the preparers of the information. It might not be like some of the users of the information might find it useful and might want that information. So I feel, yes, I mean, obviously you need, we feel this is one of the clear cases where you do need regulatory intervention to raise the bar, or it wouldn't, because you have a lot of disclosure on financially material data, you have disclosure on impacts, but usually on positive impacts when it's on a voluntary basis. So requiring a set of mandatory indicators and then providing additional tables on how investors can disclose additional information in a guided, comparable way. I think that's a good exercise, and we can discuss about the details, but I think in general, it is one of those clear cases, yes.
Thank you very much again, indeed, Philip. That's wonderful. I'm going to throw it open. We've got a couple of minutes if we have any comments or questions for Philip. Before I'm then going to ask, I'm assuming I pronounced it Jose, but I'm not sure, and then Federica to introduce themselves. Does anybody else have any comments or questions for Philip? Mr. Dean McClelland, please unmute yourself and make your point. Thank you.
Hi, Philip. I just wanted to ask something. What the European Union has been talking about getting the Capital Markets Union up and running, and you know, LTIFs were created for that purpose as such. You know, to create these long-term capital pools. I have my own interpretation of why I think it hasn't happened, and I think it's to do with the asset class that is an LTIF. But I've spent the last month trying to find firms that are offering LTIFs, because this for us is 40% of the portfolio. I can't find any. There's like 2 or 3 coming up soon. What is the delay?
Yeah, no, totally. I think there are a lot of issues with, I mean, it is an area I don't directly personally follow, but I think there are a lot of issues with LTIFs. And that is one of the reasons why at the moment, as we speak, the Commission is looking at, I mean, there is an open consultation that was launched, I think, a couple of days ago on this. So also, if you have direct experience as a user, do try to give that feedback, and we can be in touch also later on about this. But yeah, I know there are extremely few being offered at the moment, and that's one of the reasons why a review is much needed. Yeah.
One of the things that is an issue with the LTIFs is that, and I think this is something that really does need to be addressed, is we're trying to build a capital markets union at the EU level. But when we come out with products, which are European products like the LTIFs, we see that at the national member state level, there's suddenly a push to give tax advantages to national products. And that just kills, for example, LTIFs. It's what's going to kill the PEP unless we do something about the tax issue. So this again is the issue, and I'll go into a little bit later when I speak about how we need to fix financial services by really focusing what should be done at the member state level, what should be done at the EU level.
Thank you very much indeed. A very interesting point you make there, Josina. Thank you. Anybody have anything else for Philip before we go to Francisca, Federica, and Jose to introduce themselves?
Okay, hello. I just want to make an apology. I must have got the starting time wrong because I thought it was early. How late am I, by the way?
No, 55 minutes, Francisca, but don't worry.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, I get confused with British and Austrian time, sorry.
Don't worry, I do that all the time. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank
Okay.
you, yeah. Okay, well, I've noticed, I think one of my concerns is just really false advertising. And I was, you know, subject of financial mis-selling about 5 years ago. And I keep on getting the advertisements, and I actually keep them. I screen copy them and keep copies of it all, and I let the people talk to me so that I can hear them come out with the same rubbish I heard 8 years ago. And I would love to be able to publicize this information so that other people are forewarned, because they're so professional, these companies. And one of them was a scam where somebody was trying to pretend to sell something. And I did suspect after a while it was a scam. And I contacted the police, and I even heard that this really was a scam. And I still don't think the police managed to do anything about it, even though, you know, they confirmed it was a real scam, a real organization trying to get people to spend lots of money on a fictitious startup in shares. And, you know, these people are allowed to advertise on Facebook, on Google, on our emails, and all these things. And I just think there should be stronger controls to prevent people from doing so.
Thank you, Francisca. Just to support the point that Francisca's making, the Transparency Task Force has now submitted 4 paper evidence papers to the inquiry on pension scams. And the last one we did was on the international dimension. And we really do think that desperately needs to be more joined up thinking on an international basis to try to clamp down on this terrible problem we have with pension scams. We'll invite Francisca to properly introduce herself in a moment, but before we do, does anybody have anything else that they'd like to mention to Philip before we conclude Philip's section? It looks like we're hunky-dory on that, in which case what we do in the Transparency Task Force to show appreciation, because clapping doesn't really work on Zoom, we simply wave like this. So can we all please wave our appreciation to Philip? That's very good. Thank you very much indeed, Philip, for your session. Great to have you with us. And yes, I think I made the point earlier, Alexandra will fix up a Zoom meeting for me, for you, Philip, and Greg Leroy, the Chief Exec of Violation Tracker. That will be right up your street. So we're going to go to Jose, forgive me if I've mispronounced your first name, sir, to introduce himself. We know he's another CFA participant. Lovely to have you with us. Please introduce yourself, sir. Thank you.
I'm Jose Carlos, and I work for Deutsche Bank in Madrid as a financial analyst and business project manager. Well, I joined the advocacy team in CFA Spain last year as a volunteer, and now I'm trying to go a little bit farther than as a volunteer, and I'm a member for this team this year. And well, and now I'm being introduced in these conferences and this complex world of regulation, which I confront regulation from the business side, with the MiFID too, and well, now I'll be around as far as I can during these interesting and really interesting meetings.
Thank you very much. Lovely to have you with us. And my colleague will arrange for you and I to have a conference call, to introduce ourselves properly on a more one-to-one basis. It's nice to have you with us, Jose. Thank you very much. We're now going to go to Federica Gazzaloni, who has not yet had a chance to introduce herself. So lovely to see you again, Federica. Please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening. This is my first meeting with you. I've had a couple of with Andy Travelli and with Josina. Very nice to see you again. So briefly introduce about me. I'm an actuary. I'm qualified, formally qualified in Italy. Then I spent a few years in the UK. So I'm a volunteer for the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. and I have other affiliations with the International Institute of Actuaries. About my specialization, so from the university, is on financial modelings. In practice, I'm more a theorist than a practitioner. So now I think the financial services is going to have a bit of work to do for dealing with this outbreak. So as the waves are increasing all over the world, I think the very important things we need to focus on are the connections and the proper evidence that we can be all connected and share our knowledge in these times where we are all home, and to somehow increase our learnings. So I want to get a chance for stressing out about education. Financial education is very important for everyone to understand what are the main line to follow. I think Europe and all the other partners is going to have very good presence impression on the population, as we are all going through very difficult times. It is not all just unemployment for redundancies or any other cases, but now more people are going to suffer about financial losses. So I think we all should think about the solutions and round about solving issues about financial services and how it will be more useful for the people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the chance for talking to you. Wish you a good evening.
Thank you, Federica. Lovely to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed. Wonderful. Okay.
Can I say something? I just wanted to say that, Federica, I thought you made some lovely points. So thank you very much for that. And I think encouraging education is a key thing. I actually think that's one of the things I've noticed. I'm living in Austria, is people do not invest, generally speaking. The standard person does not invest themselves. They just don't have the knowledge. They don't even have the beginnings of the knowledge. You know, in Britain, I think people are much more literate about stocks and shares than they are in certainly in Austria. So thank you very much for that. I thought that was good.
Thank you, Francisca. Thank you. We're now going to go straight to Mr. Dean McClelland. So, Dean, over to you, please. If you're not already, please unmute yourself and then share us your insight around the question, what's it going to take to fix financial services in Europe? And obviously tell us more about Tontine Trust, because I know that's part of the solution. Over to you, Dean. Thank you very much.
Okay, so similarly with Philip, I wasn't sure exactly what the format was, so I was kind of going to wait and wing it depending on what I heard. I actually want Josina to talk first because I want to understand what she understands before I touch upon any areas where I'm an amateur compared to her. But yeah, one of the things we wanted to discuss is that, you know, I think Arno and Philip will have encountered this, that, you know, they're pushing organizations to improve and be better. But the reality is they're incumbents. They have existing business models, they have existing structures, and they don't want to change. Change is jeopardizing their way of being. We expect to bring about change simply by providing a different type of leadership, by launching a product that consumers actually want, that gives them what they want, and kind of using transparency and low fees as a weapon against these people. And, you know, by all means, these incumbents can react and compete on transparency and price. I honestly just don't think they will. It's the nature of the beast that they tend not to. So kind of, there's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on, but I really want to use this opportunity just to kind of give a high level of what we're actually doing, so that it puts in context what we're talking about, if that's okay. So I'm just going to use our standard presentation, if I can figure out which window to open it in. And I'll run through it quickly, because I'm really hoping I get some awful questions from RNow, because, for those that don't know Better Finance, they're the bruisers of the consumer advocacy world. They do not pull their punches. So let me see if I can just share the screen. See if I can get the right one. Okay, that's showing.
Yes, it is. Yeah, perfectly well.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So what we're solving is what has been described by Bill Sharp as the Nobel Prize-winning Bill Sharp as the nastiest, hardiest problem in finance, which is how to make your retirement savings last as long as you do in retirement. And it's a very complicated issue, and it's such a complicated issue that the defined benefit pension industry threw up their hands in 1980 and said, we can't do this. Let consumers do it for themselves, which possibly wasn't the greatest idea for society. So to understand the genesis of what we're doing, basically the way we see the world is that, we all share the same goal. Whatever it is, we're going to work hard all our lives. We're going to put money aside. And when we get to retirement, we just want to relax and enjoy those years with our family or whoever it is we want to spend it with. And that's the dream we all grew up believing in. But in 2017, I found out that this dream no longer exists. I was having a conversation with my mother, who's retired down in Spain, and she was explaining to me that all of the members of the golf club, they tend to obsess about one thing, and that is that they're worried that they'll live so long that they run out of money. And for them, if they ran out, they're talking about moving home to Ireland or England, and possibly, if their kids can't take care of them, ending up in a state nursing home, which for them is going to prison. So I started looking for a solution to this problem. And it is a genuine problem, because if you look at 65-year-old men today, 33% of them will end up living into their 90s. For women, it's much worse. Typically, women have been paid less over the course of their careers. Many have taken career breaks that have children. So they've accumulated less in their savings account. And then when they reach retirement, they have the great news, which is that they're going to live even longer than men. So 44% of 65-year-old women today are going to live into their 90s, which means they probably have to support themselves for longer than their whole working careers.
Wow.
And this is it's not a pleasant topic to discuss sometimes, but essentially, it's not a situation you want to end up in. In Japan, which is maybe a couple of decades ahead of where Europe is at the moment, we've now got a major problem. You've got old people committing petty crimes to get thrown into prison so that they've got somewhere to sleep and eat for the night. So if we look at the state of the industry at the moment, obviously the defined benefit has gone the way of the dinosaurs. The main product that's on offer at the moment, if you're worried about outliving your money, is an annuity. But I think, as we all know on this call, annuities are extremely complex. They charge obscenely high fees, and they also feel very unfair. So the default option that's left to everybody is defined contribution, or if you look through the lens of the new PEP products, we're talking about lifestyle PEPs, but essentially it's just another defined contribution savings product. In 2017, there was a study by 100 insurers where they asked consumers what they wanted from their retirement product. And they determined that the perfect product for consumers is that it offers a lifetime income at a fair rate. The income should increase over time to stay ahead of inflation. It should charge low fees. it should be simple, and it should be transparent about what it's invested in. I don't have that in the presentation, but I'm sure everybody on the call agrees about that. But this 88-page study concluded that actually, you know, for an insurer to offer a product like this, it would be impossible, particularly at a low cost. And anyone that's been witness to the PEP negotiations over the last few years will have heard these sort of arguments over and over. But the reality is that since 2007, there's been academics around the world saying, actually, there's a better way to do this. 400 years ago, there was a product created called a tontine, which allowed people to pool their own mortality risk. It was extremely successful. It was actuarially sound. It was much less costly than annuities. Yet insurance companies aren't offering them, even though it's the obvious solution. And we know for a fact that consumers love tontines. They've always outsold any other financial product wherever they've been offered. So quickly to explain what a tontine is, so that everybody knows what it's about. Essentially, it's like a mutual society where you join into a pool with 10,000 people of a similar age and gender. You contribute to what you can, and then the trustees act in a fiduciary capacity to invest the money and then disperse it as quickly as they can back to the members without in any way allowing the money to run out before the last of the members in that closed pool passes away. The key feature of a tontine is that because you're in a closed pool, if you start off with 10,000 members age 65, by age 75, you're probably down to about 8,000 members. By age 85, you're probably down to about 4,000 members. And the rule of a tontine is, if you're dead, you don't need the money. So whatever money you've invested, you no longer need the payments from that. And those payments are shared with the surviving members. And that creates a system where the payments of the surviving members go up over time. And that's why they stay ahead of inflation. The Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich has done several papers on this. And they have said, look, a world with tontines is better than a world without. Because the moment a saver joins a tontine, they increase the value of their pension wealth by 87% with zero added risk. So we're not taking any more risk with the assets. It's all about just pooling the mortality risk. How we're building out the platform is that everything is digital. And we do this for fairness and for cost reasons. So everything is run on the cloud. All of the actuarial statistics, which I'm sure I'll ask Federica about later on, are managed by the platform. And all of the investments and transactions and everything that we do are printed onto distributed ledgers so that everybody can see what's going on and they can trust that in 20, 40 years' time, they're still going to be able to get their pension paid, which is not the case everywhere else in the world. So basically, in a nutshell, what the product is it provides you with an income for life that can never run out. And from a technical perspective, it enhances your pension wealth by 87%. It adheres to the PEP standards, which are a blessing to us because we've been working on this for 3 years. And when we read the rules, it almost felt as if it was written for us. If you look compared to a life annuity, we estimate that we reduce the cost of ownership by approximately 98%. Because everything is wrapped up in the 1% per annum fee. And there's no guarantee required, and there's no guarantee paid for. And much more importantly, unlike any annuity, the payments go up over time, and not because of our investment strategy, but because the other members are dying off. And that allows people to benefit and see an increasing income. How safe are tontines? If you look at the US, 49 out of 50 US state pension schemes are going to run out of money within the next 7 to 15 years because they're using the money of workers today to pay retirees. And ultimately, that money is going to run out. The only state that has a 100% fully funded pension is Wisconsin, because they run it like a tontine, in that they monitor the investment returns and mortality, and they adjust everybody's payments over time so that, you know, if people are dying faster or more slowly, they'll increase or slow down the rate of payment, which is exactly what we do. People often see the graph and say, oh, this looks way too good to be true. You know, how can it be possible? But the reality is, if you strip out 98% of the costs, the returns jump immediately. But much more importantly, the nature of the return is not from the investments, it's from the fact that you're outliving everybody else in your pool. There's people been predicting how big the tontine industry is going to be. Forbes said a couple of years ago that's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. I think on the Better Finance conference a few weeks ago, a lot of people were talking about tontines being the future of PEPs. The same week, the Brookings Institute in Washington was having a conference, and they were asking, you know, why is America so behind the rest of the world in developing its own retirement tontines? So this is going to be a big market, and certainly it's a market that's so big that it actually could affect the Capital Markets Union. I won't go into all that. Probably won't go into the details of that. So that's the product that we're building to do it. And essentially the bits that I kind of wanted to talk about is that if we, well, first of all, Josina was saying that the PEPs industry isn't going to work because of the tax rules. We are absolutely hoping that the fair competition rules will be allowed in Europe, such that if Ireland's offering tax breaks for saving into a pension product, that will have to be applied to the pan-European pensions. And then as a pan-European tontine pension, we can roll these products out across Europe. And the really interesting thing about these products is that it allows us to deploy capital over the long term. An insurance company can't, for example, invest in LTIFs because it's an equity. It's a fund, therefore it's an equity, so they can't hold it on the balance sheet to offset liabilities. If you look at all the lifestyle funds that BlackRock and Fidelity are going to launch under the PEP wrapper, they have to have liquidity, so they can't invest in LTIFs. We're the ones that will be investing in the LTIFs because we need long-term stable returns. And that's why I was asking the question of Philip, because we can't find any. You know, it's now is the time for them to start getting the LTIF industry on the road, because the tontine industry is going to need to find long-term places to park the money. Yeah, I think, yeah, sorry, the only other thing I wanted to say, so this is what we're doing. Everybody told us for the last 3 years, you're insane. The industry will never let you do this. They'll never license it. Well, funny enough, the PEP legislation has now been passed. And then everybody tells us, well, actually, consumers won't trust you. And our answer to that is they don't need to trust us, because actually you can see all of our books, records, investments, every fee we pay, you know, every conflict of interest, if it exists at all, is publicly disclosed. So if anybody is unsure about trusting us, go on and read all the information, which is kind of published to the web live every day. And if any competitor tries to come out and say that we're not as safe as them, you know, we can show them that we're indeed much safer than an insurance company. And, you know, if they really want to compare and get into the detail, we'd ask them to publish their balance sheets as well, which, you know, is never going to happen. But that's more or less what we're doing. And we hope it's going to set a new standard in Europe in the pensions industry.
Thank you very much indeed, Dean. That was excellent. Really, really powerful messages there. We really like tontine approach because it's transparent, it's equitable, there's an inherent logic in it. What I like is it's actually solving the actual problem. The actual problem is, what happens if I live longer than my money does? You know, what if I run out of money in retirement? Well, that's the actual problem. So let's create a solution to solve that problem, not a more complicated problem than that, which we seem to have created for ourselves. So Dean, thank you very, very much indeed for your presentation. A quick question from me, then I know there's others that are going to want to make comments and ask questions as well. Do you think that you and any other tontine-based solutions might genuinely stimulate demand for the long-term investments that you seek? Because if there's a market for it, if there's a demand for it, hopefully something's going to happen to fill that void. What do you think, Dean?
If you go back to Adam Smith in Wealth of Nations, you know, he explains that tontines were the first pan-European pension fund. I was sent a paper the other day talking about the amount of Swiss investors that used to invest in Irish tontines, and this happened for 150 years. Everybody was investing in tontines all over Europe, particularly the Swiss. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But as Smith said, tontines always outsell any other pension product by a massive degree. So the PEP industry, which people are still hesitant, saying, you know, will it really make a difference? It will now, because it enables a new generation of tontine investment products, which are proven to get consumers excited. Like if you look at Belgium, and I was speaking to another government as well, but I can't say who it is. They want to use national tontines to raise like a 20 billion fund, with the idea being that 15 billion will be invested as a normal pension fund, but 25% will be invested into you know, all the sort of projects Philip was talking about, infrastructure, you know, environmental products, and recapitalizing all the SME sector that has suffered over the last year.
Thank you, Dean. Let's throw it open, folks. Would anybody have anything that they would like to ask or any comments to make in relation to Dean's presentation? It looks like we might all be good. Jose, I think you want to go.
Yes, well, I'm not familiar with this investment schemes, but I would like to know if is there any experience on this in any product or in any country which is has been delivered results that can be checked. For instance, is there any investment track record for return and risk for any example of these investment vehicles?
Well, they financed Europe for 200 years, which is something of a track record, and they were very popular. 150 years ago, they were launched in the US, and they were so successful, they grew the US insurance industry by 600% within a generation, until the insurance companies started defrauding the members by tampering with the membership ledgers, misinvesting the assets, and churning customers between different pools and charging the expenses, the sales commission to the members. But other than that, the tontines have proved actuarially sound. But to an extent, they've gone out of existence because of what the US insurers did 110 years ago. That said, there is a tontine in existence now, which is the Swissair pension fund. When Swissair went bankrupt, they abandoned the pension scheme and kind of said, look, you've got a few billion, you've 14,000 members, just go and manage it and do your best. And effectively, they've operated like a tontine since. And if I think there's one day a year when all the members of the Swissair pension fund meet with the trustees and raise glasses of champagne because their payments have gone up again that year because the numbers of members have fallen. So I think that's the current one that's live in the market. There's been a few that have been launched in Japan, but they're hybrid annuity type products, and I struggle to even explain them to you because they've embedded fees. But the tontine is simple. We don't need great asset managers. We just need people that can kind of, if they give us 3.5% per year, we stay ahead of inflation. Yeah, even Deutsche Bank could manage that for us, I think.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dean. Any other comments or questions for Dean? I have one more question for you then, Dean. So you talked about how tontines fell apart in the US. What mechanisms have you or are you going to be putting in place to prevent the kind of abuses that took place in the States happening within your framework?
Yeah, well, essentially there was a thing called the Armstrong Commission established in 1905. 1906, and they investigated all the insurance companies, and they found that people related to the directors had been appearing in tontine ledgers as if they'd been in there 20 years. And then the monies were being invested in private entities related to the directors, where the directors had shareholdings or, clear conflicts of interest. And in order that we can never be accused of anything like this could possibly happen in ours, we print everything to distributed ledgers. So, in terms of member signups, deposits, investments made by us, everything's tracked on distributed ledgers. So if we're attempting to cheat, we're publishing all the data for anybody to be able to audit on a daily basis. And we hope that this is going to make a significant difference in terms of how people trust where they're putting their money for retirement.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you very much. Francisca, quick question or comment from you, and then we'll move on to have a short comfort break. Francisca, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm a real fan of what you've said, and I've heard you make I've heard presentations about this subject before. It sounds wonderful and very sensible, but I must admit my only problem with what you've said is you could publish wonders. How do we know it's really true?
Actually, that's great. We're in talks with there's a company in Ireland called Gecko Governance, and they're building a blockchain-based system that allows them to publish the records of meetings of investment committees and decisions and stuff like that. And they've created a system where all that stuff is recorded. And the idea is that we give these people access to what we're doing, so that anything that, so it's them printing to the ledgers rather than us. So if we're using, let's say, Deutsche as a custodian bank, they will be reading the balances at the account of Deutsche rather than us saying, oh yeah, that's what we have at Deutsche. And they will be the ones reporting on any decisions of the trustees that vary anything going along.
And who are Gecko?
It's sort of a RegTech firm in Ireland that's backed by Enterprise Ireland. But there's quite a few of these firms. We're happy to work with as many as possible, because I think what they're doing is very important.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Dean. In a moment, we're going to be thanking Dean for his presentation. We're going to do that now. Then we're going to have a 2 or 3 minute comfort break just to stretch your legs. Then we'll be back. And after the break, we're going to have Jacina. So can we all please show our appreciation to Dean for his session? Thank you very much indeed for doing that. Well done, Dean. Good job, sir. Very, very good. Dean, put your contact details, I would suggest, sir, into the chat. So if anybody have any further questions, they can put them to you afterwards. And I encourage you all to do the same. It's 6:30 now UK time. It's 6:30. We're going to have a 5-minute comfort break. So please reconvene at 25 to the hour. So we've all got 5 minutes to do whatever we want. And then we will reconvene after that with Jacina's presentation. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. We are going to be reconvening. Thank you all very much indeed for your participation and input so far. It's been excellent. We've had a range of perspectives from different speakers. We're now going to invite Jacina to unmute and take the stage, as it were. Jacina, over to you. Thank you very much.
I think the speakers before really gave some thought to what I was going to say, and I think that's good. I want to make a quick comment to Brian on his long battle. There is another option, even though I gather, Brian, you're British, but the European Parliament has a petitions committee. And if any of your issues are through European issues, then you can take your petition to that committee as a person and highlight the problem. You can either co-sign it with different people or you can sign it on your own. And why I say that's important is that petitions have notably led to the creations of temporary committees. And one of them was, I participated in that, was back in 2009 for the Equitable Life scam, which maybe some of you remember, and led to thousands and thousands of people really in desperate state. And that was taken to this committee, and a temporary committee called the Equitable Life Committee was set up, EQUI, and you can still find information about it. There's a report, by the way, which was done on that. And why I'm saying that's important is that the new Commissioner for Financial Services in the European Union is Mairead McGuinness. Now, Mairead McGuinness is the Irish Commissioner, and she led this temporary committee. So there is a chance that she might actually listen. And I would say there's an opportunity here. So anyway, that was my thought to Brian. Now, I work for CFA Institute. I'm head of regulatory outreach, and it's been my absolute pleasure the last 7 years to do this. I feel it's been the cherry on top of my cake life, let's say. I feel that I am allowed to speak with a bold voice. I represent 170,000 charter holders throughout the globe, and we represent people. So while they're professionals and very talented, and we have two of them here with us tonight, they are people, and so it's their views and their concerns, and the work they do with the societies in their member countries is on a volunteer basis. So even more impressive that with their day jobs, they give time back to society. And I think that is absolutely laudable. So I have the opportunity to work with these volunteers, these people that make up CFA, that have done the CFA exam. As I said, I have seen in my own career in banking with different banking groups, I have seen quite a lot of mis-selling scandals, abuse of ethics, really quite bad situations, I would say. It led me to change careers to go to the European Parliament to actually act as an expert. And when I left the banking sector, people said to me, oh, you leave your bonus behind, you leave your car and you go and work as an administrator in the Parliament while you're doing this. I said, well, I need to understand what is driving policymakers. And that's what I'm going to try and do with you today, because it's thanks to that understanding of 6 years work in the European Parliament, combined with my career, previous career in capital markets and banking, that I can understand where policy work comes from. I understand the frustrations, that why we can still talk about financial services that needs to work together 20 years after the Financial Services Action Plan took place in Europe. I joined the Parliament when there was a review of this Financial Services Action Plan, and one of the reports written by a Dutch MEP already said there should be horizontal lines throughout regulation if we want to succeed in a European level. And it is important. It is important to have horizontal lines, not to act in silos. When you act in silos, you cannot create a market. I think PEP is a very interesting product. I've been a big defender of it. And Dean, for your information, I appear on the European Commission's website as one of these people that should definitely have a PEP, because I have about 12 different pension schemes, because I worked in 5 European countries. So I'm one of these people for who a CMU and a proper capital markets would really work. I'm a true European. I believe that the power of Europe is strong. It has many failings. It's a slow-moving beast. But guess what? Sometimes slow-moving can be good. Where are we now? I would say when we look at how can we fix it, we're 12 years after the financial crisis. We're in another crisis of a far bigger and more uncertain outcome, I would say. And I remember before, I think it was in October 2019, with some colleagues when we were brainstorming on capital markets, we were saying, well, we haven't solved any of the issues of the last financial crisis. God help us if we have another one. And a few months later, lo and behold, there we are. So we've done a Corona survey with our global membership, and I would really I will send it around to Andy to share the link with you. It is very gives a lot of food for thought from the macro about the economic recovery and the role of governments, but I'm not really wanting to talk about that. What I think is important is the 2 tables on regulation. And our members are very pragmatic. They see that there should be no sort of backwinding of regulation. So not quick fixes, because after all, as everybody has seen, for example, in MiFID, compliance with MiFID has been huge. The amount of time, the amount of jobs that some great big companies, big banking groups or big asset managers have had to take up to deal with MiFID II is huge. And still it's not even taken on board. So doing a quick fix may actually really create chaos. What also is important is the new perspective, which is very different from the last financial crisis. I mean, the last financial crisis, anybody who worked in finance was a bad wolf. And I remember when I joined the parliament, I was almost pointed with a finger saying, oh, you're bad, you come out of banking. And it took 2 years for some MEPs to want to speak to me, even though I had actually left the sector and had joined the parliament. That's how bad it was. Now the industry is seen as a partner in spite of some of the mis-selling. And I think that's interesting because that's a chance we have to really fix the trust issue and to fix really acting for the end investor. Dean, and I think you're absolutely correct in saying investors shouldn't have to take trust. Transparency should be such that you can understand. Now, the problem is, of course, we can't devote too much financial education. You can't say you need to understand everything. So that is the difficulty. How do you make that triangle between the right product governance, between the fiduciary duty and financial education? Now that is a complex one. But I think if we get that right, we're going to be there. And I think this measure of transparency at CFA Institute, we really want total transparency. And that's why we work together with Better Finance on quite a few issues. And I know, of course, Arnaud and Guillaume very well. And our 2 organizations work together on sustainable value for money, a task report, which I can share also with you, where we see that both financial users and finance professionals think that fiduciary duty is about the most important thing to address when you want to reestablish a trust in the industry. And I agree with that. I think, you know, it is important to fix this. And I think the European Commission is very aware of this. There is a task force within the European Commission which is looking at business conduct, and should there be a different way to look at business conduct, as we've seen with the violation tracker. It's quite extraordinary, the amount of washing, sort of blind thinking, you know, with end investors. It's quite horrifying. I mean, when you read the Wells Fargo case, and I remember when I worked in banking, how cross-selling was being touted as being absolutely important. And you know how utterly wrong that can go. I remember also having long discussions in some of the brainstorming meetings I have in the Vatican, talking about finance for the common good, which is really interesting. And at the latest brainstorming, which was last Friday, we had one of the EU commissioners speaking and a very important central bank governor. Again, this is where religion, finance, society is linking up to look at what is important for people. And I think, you know, the Tontine is a very good example of something that happened in history. And I think, you know, the other examples, for example, is on Islamic finance. We can learn a lot from Islamic finance about the pragmatism. What is finance for? Islamic finance is very interesting. I work with an ethics prize for young people under 35. And some of the essays I read are extremely inspiring. I think young people should be much more involved in regulation. I had a chat with some of the European Supervisory Authority chairs, Bernardino and Seven Mayor, and I said, why don't you get a group of young people sitting in and advising you in the committees, because it's their future we're talking about. We're old people. We're all of us old. You know, I have a daughter of 13, but nearly 14, that tells me, what are you doing for me, for my generation? Are you actually doing anything, or are you just talking, right? I'm just talking. So we need to fix it for the future generations. That's what we need to keep in mind, but we need to bring them on board. What do they really want? And I think Dean is doing that with his tontine, is thinking, what do people really want? They really want to know that the pensions they have are low cost and they're going to suffice them for their long retirement. You need to think of that end investor. And I think we need to go back to what used to happen in the medical profession, but I can't say that is it happening today, because they're going a little bit haywire too. But the medical profession used to think of their patient, and they wouldn't explain. They wouldn't explain the pills that were in the uttermost detail, but they would explain the purpose, and that's important. And if you understood why you were taking a particular pill, you would do it. And that is really important. And you would have a generalist practitioner who would help you. Now, of course, we don't have generalist practitioners hardly, and we have sort of online counseling. So that's why I'm saying I think, unfortunately, the medical profession is moving a little bit away from this fiduciary responsibility. But let's get it back. In one of our studies, which I've shared with the European Commission, is the future of the investment professional. There's a very nice comparison and awareness of financial advisors having to become life counselors. And I think that, again, is something that can help fix the financial system. You have to look at that final investor as a whole. That investor needs money in 10 years' time to pay university for his children. He may have medical issues in 20 years' time. He may be going through a divorce in 30 years' time, or it may be all inversed. But these are facts for that investor. You can't just come to him and say, look, there's your product. This is it. No, they want this tailored product. And I think, Dean, you mentioned it, data. Data can give us granularity. We saw it with the advent of peer-to-peer lending, how suddenly, if you invested in peer-to-peer, you could see that that money that went into a peer-to-peer platform was being used to buy a wedding dress in Manchester. Well, that's granularity. That's interesting, right? So that's where we are going to start fixing some of these issues. And I know I'm speaking too much, but I could go on for hours. I'm sorry, I get very passionate. Andy knows this, so I'll stop here and let other people speak. Thank you.
Please never apologize for what you say, Justina. It's always very, very valuable, very, very insightful. And I could see from the reactions of several of the guests today that you've hit the nail on the head for many, many people. Justina, thank you very, very much indeed. We do have time for some questions and comments and responses to that. Thank you. Let's invite people to raise their hand, just wave at me if you would like to say something. Dean, I saw you nodding, more than nodding on a few occasions. So why don't we go straight to Dean and ask Dean to respond to some of the comments that Justina made. It seems like there's been a bit of a meeting of minds between the two of you. Dean, over to you.
Well, it's just a couple of comments. It's like, one, I didn't want Justina to stop. It's like, brilliant. I'm so happy that there's people in Brussels that understand this and they're actually doing something about it. So, so I'm going to be pestering her for calls now to go through.
Good, pleasure.
All that.
Pleasure.
There's one thing you were mentioning about healthcare. One of our backers loves telling the story about the two great things that the world forgot. One was tontines and the other one was healthcare. He said the way healthcare used to work was that everybody in the village paid the doctor to keep them healthy. And it was like a subscription service. And if you got sick, you didn't have to pay. So he was incentivized, or she was incentivized, to get you healthy as quickly as possible so that you could resume paying. So the incentive was always to keep everybody healthy. Whereas now you've got the inverse situation where actually they're incentivized to keep you, on medicine or on treatment.
Exactly.
But,
exactly.
Very, very, very interesting. Yeah, I loved everything you had to say.
We'll be engaging. Yes, we'll engage together. That's fine.
Very, very good, Justina. Very good, Dean. Francisca, you have your hand up. Please do share your point. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say that I read a book which I think somebody said was the best book she'd read, and I actually concur. And I don't know whether any of you have read it. Have you read Factfulness by Hans Rosling?
Mm-mm.
It's absolutely brilliant. The man.
What's it called?
I'm just putting it on. I honestly can't tell you. In fact, I'll even send you an email with highlights. It was so bloody interesting. I've photographed the most relevant bits, and he was absolutely amazing. But what was really almost sad, really, he was a doctor, but he ended up getting involved in all sorts of countries like Africa, you know, years and years ago, and solved things by looking at the data. He got very interested in the data, how that could solve problems. Like there was a country in Mozambique where people were getting mysteriously paralyzed and things like that. I don't want to go over too long, but he could tell. I mean, he died in 2017. His son and daughter-in-law have produced magical graphs, which you can see on a website. So if I send you the email, Andy, you could send it to everybody else, because emails are 3-dimensional on all this. But he predicted all sorts of things. One of the things he said was that the West have not realized that the East is actually better at doing many things. And, you know, if you want to invest in the future, invest in the East. And he predicted, he had been involved with the research behind, I'm going to forget what the virus was, but the Ebola crisis. And he was saying that people were instant reacting stupidly. They were doing stupid things instantly because we have to react. And he got his son to analyze the data, and they realized that the strategies they were adopting were actually working out. But the people on the ground were reacting and saying, oh, nothing's working. And they hadn't realized it was working because they hadn't analyzed the data. And you know, there's so many things, but one of the facts he also came up with, he was looking at lifestyle versus how much people, you know, he puts people, the world, into 4 different levels of income. And America spends much more on healthcare than most other countries. But there are 39 other nations that are doing better at healthcare than the US. And the main reason is that they are just focusing on private care, so that somebody who's well off and thinks they may, you know, have a headache gets the treatment, but the basic care for the poor is not available. And, you know, so he's saying that really, if you have healthcare for everybody, everybody benefits, and it's actually cheaper in the long run than just focusing on the private people, and the rest of them, you know, are suffering and probably spreading the virus and all the rest of it. So anyway, if you like, I'll send an email with some of these highlights, and then you can decide if you want to read it. But I think the book is utterly astonishing in terms of how it analyzes facts and how you can analyze it and see how it works for the world.
Francisca, thank you for sharing that very much. And Dean has very kindly and very quickly put a link to the book into the chat. And Francisca, please email Alexandra as soon as possible with your comments about the book, and we'll circulate those tomorrow. I'm aware that Krzysztof Grabowski, I love saying Krzysztof's name. What a great name. Krzysztof Grabowski. Sounds like a film star, doesn't it? Yeah? Krzysztof, it is your turn to speak. I know you want to say something. Go for it, sir. Go for it.
One observation of Josina is very, very precious for me, and I believe we should consider it very seriously. About when you go to the doctor, he gives you some pills, and he explains what the pills serve for. Yes. He does not explain what is in the pill, because we cannot understand it. You see, I am a chemist. My education is as a chemist, and I don't understand all those pills, what is inside and how they work. But if the doctor explains me, really explains me that it will help to my heart, or it will help, and why it will help, and how it will help my heart, then I can trust him. So maybe we put too much stress to financial education, because we cannot understand all those even simple products. The simple people, he does not understand what a person is. So he does not understand the financial product. But if we explain him what that exact product serves for, how it can help him. That's our task. So maybe we should put more stress to explaining than to educate.
Christoph, your point is so valid. We'll go to Philip in just a moment. Philip, I've seen your hand go up. Thank you. Your point is so valid, but I think what you've done is reinforced a point I was making earlier. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen again, folks. So this is the violation tracker I showed everybody earlier. All the time that we have the financial services sector being the least trustworthy industry in the world, we have a systemic problem that is so big, we are educating people to have good reason to not trust the industry. And if people do not trust the industry, they will not accept the guidance, the instruction, the advice, go and do this. We may trust our doctor, but the financial services sector's conduct is leading people to not trust the industry. That is why we need to ensure through interventions by regulators, policymakers, politicians, trade bodies, professional associations, we have to treat the trust deficit in financial services as a priority one issue. And I'm not saying this just to be kind to Jacina or the other CFA members on the session tonight. I've put this on record many times. If every trade body and professional association within the financial services sector was as tuned into the problem of the trust deficit, as well as CFA societies around the world, we would not be in the mess we are in. But believe me, we are in a big mess. That is why the financial services sector is arguably broken. That's why we're running this event about what's it going to take to fix it. I'm going to go to Philip in just a second. We'll be wrapping up formally at about at the top of the hour in just a few minutes, but we will leave the channel open for anybody that wishes to share further thoughts. Thank you very much. Philip, to you, sir. Thank you.
Just a brief comment because I had to dash off, but I wanted to say that I totally agree with what has just been said, and I think also with the example of the doctor, I think makes it really clear. But I agree with what Josina was saying with that it's about the triangle of yes, the financial education to a certain extent, but also the fiduciary duty and the governance and inducements and sort of what incentives are there, and obviously the transparency, which is paramount. And I think in some way that's also it also relates to the issue of sustainability. And again, the CFA is doing great work there with the, for instance, the ESG certificate and so on, where it's not necessarily that it's in bad faith, but I mean, the road to hell is paved in good intentions. So I think there is a lot going wrong at the individual level, not necessarily by bad meaning people, but it's just that how the system is set up can often lead to the wrong incentives. So I think that's a bit the reason why we, for instance, our action in our policy engagement, we support like expanding financial education and initiatives in that sense and so, but we are sometimes a bit afraid that this whole talk about financial education can distract from the structural issues, which so it's a bit of a red herring sometimes. At least some people use it as such. So I wanted to thank everyone for the interesting discussion. As I said, I have to leave to another call now, but it's been really, really interesting, and I look forward to interacting with all of you at some point.
Thanks, Philip. I know just before you go, you're going to want to join me with everybody else in thanking Jacina for her session. So let's please wave our appreciation to Jacina. Jacina, thank you very, very much indeed. Very, very good indeed. Okay, well, we are going to be wrapping up formally now. Thank you, Jacina. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, everybody that's been able to participate. Philip, thank you for your session earlier as well. I will leave the chat open for a little while now. So if anybody wants to go, please feel free to do so. But in case you want to have some further conversation in a very kind of light touch, facilitated way, we'll do that. So the session is now formally over.